being an approachable leader creates a tremendous amount of trust. And I think with that, you have to be authentic, and often you have to push yourselves. While I told you I was kind of a social person in high school and had a lot of friends when I graduated high school, when I went to Clemson, I didn't know anyone, became probably a little bit more of an introvert. But I know in the world of being a publicly, traded company CEO and a public face, you got to push yourself to get out there. So even if it's not natural, get out there and engage with people. It creates a deeper degree of connectivity, and all that coming back to the culture of the company.
Everyone's talking about the metaverse these days, but Workplace from Meta is different. I mean, the clue's in the name, right? Workplace is a business communication tool that uses features like instant messaging and video calls to help people share information. Think Facebook, but for your company. It's part of Meta's vision for the future of work, a future in which your job isn't just something you do, but something you experience. And if you've been listening to this show, you know that experience is something that I am very passionate about and talk about a lot. Workplace from Meta is creating a future in which we'll all feel more present, connected, and productive. You can learn more and start your journey into the future of work at workplace.com/future. Again, that's workplace.com/future. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Leading the Future of Work. My guest today, JB, CEO of Ally Financial. JB, thank you for joining me.
It's great to be here, Jacob. Thanks very much for having me.
Of course. Before we talk about all the fun leadership stuff, why don't you give us a little bit of insight as to where you came from and how did you become the CEO of Ally Financial? And you can even take us back to how you were raised, where you grew up.
Sure. I always like a softball to start. That's an easy one, but kind of classic Midwestern kid. I grew up in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, and the vast majority of my family still lives there. But I was a baby of 4 kids, and for college, wanted to do something outside of Ohio. I have a lot of Ohio State diehard fans and family members as part of my broad crew, but I actually went south and found Clemson University. I didn't know one person the day I walked in the door at Clemson, but I liked big football. I liked what Clemson was doing academically at the time, got a degree in economics, and it was a great 4 years, and really 4 years of having to build a whole new network of friends, and really learn to just, come in with a fresh start, so to speak. But I was always, kind of a social kid in high school, class president, all those things. So going to Clemson was a totally unique experience of, again, having to build a new network. But after I graduated with a degree in economics, I went back to Columbus for a couple years. Abercrombie and Fitch's home office was based there. That was actually my first role as a financial analyst right out of college. And I worked there for about a year or so, and then went and worked with my dad's international dairy business for about a year, helped really computerize his business. But it was great to work with my father, but it was rather slow. My dad would lay out work that he wanted to accomplish for the week, and often I was done kind of Monday at 12 o'clock. But, a lot of kids from Clemson graduate and go to Charlotte, North Carolina. And so after about 2.5, 3 years, I did that, started with Nations Bank, and which ultimately became Bank of America and what's known as modern Bank of America today, and really started as a ground-up analyst there. And, fast forward, that was 1998 when I started, and in 2008, in 10 years, I was actually the treasurer at Bank of America during the Great Credit Crisis at the ripe age of 34, 35. It was a wild experience. It was a very fast climb there, but, learned a lot of great things and a lot of not so great things along that journey, really starting at Abercrombie all the way through B of A. And then I came to Ally in 2009 as our corporate treasurer as well, and then ultimately ran all things finance and strategy for the company, ran our auto business for a year, and about the past 7.5 years or so, I've been very fortunate to be our chief executive officer, leading the company. It's been great fun. Honored to lead the company. It's a very different bank, and one that's all about collaboration and really embracing an opportunity to make every day better than today. And so it's a great honor to lead the company. It's been tremendous fun for me as well.
And for people who are not familiar with with Ally Financial, I think you guys have 11,000 employees, and you're all digital bank, right? So you don't actually have like a physical branch for people to go into.
Exactly right. So we are the largest all digital bank in the United States. We started the bank back in 2009, which was an interesting time to really launch a new bank and launch a new bank brand. But it's been phenomenal growth. And in fact, today, we're reporting around 133, 134 billion dollars of retail deposits that are
Wow.
on hand today, raised and gathered without one single branch. So pretty incredible what we've done on the banking side. We pay good rates, but we also have great technology, great service. And when we started the bank, a lot of us had come from larger institutions, and we thought about really flipping the model and truly putting the customer at the center of everything we do. And so it's been a great rise, tremendous scale. Obviously, through COVID, we were one of the beneficiaries where really all things digital had a further uptick and further acceleration. So feel great about that. And then we're also the largest auto lender in the U.S. So that's the big lion's share of our asset book as well. And deposits and auto loans actually match off really well together. So we've been on a great growth trajectory.
If you think back to your one of your early jobs at Abercrombie, and you think about like how work got done and processed and the technology that was used, give people a sense of what it was like to work back then. And I mean, it was a very strict hierarchy. Obviously, there were no cell phones, there was no internet, there were no laptops. I mean, how was stuff getting done back then? Do you have any stories that come to mind for you?
Yeah, I sure do. So it was a lot of early mornings back in the day, and a lot of mainframe computers and generation of large reams of printed paper that you would have to analyze. So one of the early jobs that I did in my career for Abercrombie was actually run sales for the company. So you would pull down information, what all your stores did across the U.S. You would analyze that, process that, and try to have a report on the CEO and CFO's desk by about 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. And, often those results were viewed favorably. Often they were viewed very negatively. So, I learned a lot about good culture and bad culture through some of those experiences as well. Obviously, Abercrombie's got a Netflix documentary out there that was filmed after my time.
Yes.
And so I won't really go into all those details. But, you use every experience like that at a young age, at a midterm age, and growing my career as an opportunity to think about what worked well and what are greater opportunities to improve if I could ever have a leadership role. And so I still reflect on those days back at 1995, 96. But the way work was done, Jacob, as you implied, really no cell phones, very limited technology, and a lot of paper at the time. So it's amazing what we've, all things digital today.
So you mentioned you learned a lot about a good culture and a bad culture. So maybe let's start with the bad culture piece. When you say bad culture, I mean, what were some of the things, and it doesn't just need to be necessarily at Abercrombie, but early on in your career, what did a bad culture look like? What did you observe that made you realize like, hey, this isn't right. If I ever become an executive at a company, I don't want to do it like this.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would say is really how people were viewed or often kind of pigeonholed into particular roles. So, back to my early experiences, I started as a financial analyst, and I think the company probably would have preferred to keep me a financial analyst for, the foreseeable future. There was never an opportunity to sort of export talent into other sides of the business. And candidly, back to the Abercrombie days, merchandising was kind of the sexy area of the company, the cool jobs. And but there was never really any opportunity to be a finance guy and go over into into the world of merchandising. And so, that was one of the experiences that really, honestly, caused me to leave the company. I mean, that unfolded with my dad needing assistance in his business and kind of computerizing his business, but also really
Yeah.
just I felt like had I stayed on that path, I would always be known as a finance person rather than having a broader opportunity. And I think, today, one of the things that we do really well at Ally, whether it's through our rotational programs at the early stage of somebody's career or whether it's midterm, we try to cross pollinate and allow people to get different experiences. It makes them stronger as an employee, and I think actually keeps them much more engaged in viewing the company as a career rather than just a job. And I think that's something that's really been important to me.
Any particular stories come to mind early on in your career about a good culture? Is there a particular leader who treated you a certain way where you're like, wow, and I'm going to bring that with me?
Yeah, I'll start. Back to the Nations Bank days, and again, starting there in the middle of 1998, and the CEO at the time, who I still stay in contact with several times a year, was a gentleman named Hugh McCall, and Hugh was really kind of still credited for the first banker that brought kind of coast to coast banking together. And, if you get to learn Hugh and know about Hugh, you'll find, he was a kind of a dedicated Marine, hardcore, but he created this leadership belief of all the people around him that anything was possible. And he treated people as people, and people would run through walls to try to accomplish what Hugh set out as the objective or the agenda. And still to this day, I look at what he's done for the city of Charlotte. It's just phenomenal. I mean, Hugh is still out there at the head of every major community campaign, civic campaign, diversity initiative, you name it. He's still out there hard charging in his 80s, all about making tomorrow, again, better than today. And that's one of the things that I've always admired about Hugh. And I've written Hugh on several occasions to tell him really how much his leadership style has influenced me today in my philosophy and the way I try to run the company at Ally.
What exactly did he do? So, I mean, he sounds like a very, very inspiring leader. And as you mentioned, a lot of people would run through walls for him. Why?
Yeah, I think, he always had the trust and confidence in his people that they were gonna deliver. And with that meant taking smart risks, often putting young people into big roles, giving them a stretch assignment, allow them an opportunity to grow, to learn how to make mistakes, calculated mistakes. But he created this amazing followership, again, by treating people as people. And he had this award, I never got one, called the Crystal Grenade. And it was the most coveted reward at Bank of America, Nations Bank in the day, really, which was Hugh sending his own personal acknowledgement, again, using his Marine Corps history to really give this award that said, you've gone over and above, you've gone out there. And with that philosophy, I mean, again, he assembled from one small North Carolina national bank into being the first coast-to-coast bank. So a number of acquisitions that were done that many people thought were never possible, but Hugh and the leadership team, they all worked together, and they never accepted no. They always looked at, we have an opportunity to get this done. And when you create that energy, you create that followership, it shows that really anything's possible. And so, again, I still greatly admire Hugh, not from just what he's done on a business side, but also his civic engagement as well. And I think that's one of the things that he taught all of us at every level is the importance of supporting your communities, giving back to your communities. So what I admire in Hugh is the person and the heart of that person, as well as the mindset and what he was able to accomplish from a business perspective.
What does a typical day look like for you? And take us through when you wake up and what does your routine look like up until when you go to bed?
Yeah. So typically wake up time is anywhere. It's generally about 5:30 in the morning.
Okay.
And I always try to get a workout in every single morning. Unfortunately, I had a streak of 755 days straight that ended on April the 13th. And, it's been a little choppy since then, but I like to get a morning workout every day, and less about the physical sides of that, but more about the mental release. And it's an opportunity for me to get 45 minutes or an hour of just quiet time, thought time, myself time, which I think is so critically important. And so, that's typically how the day begins. I have a wife and 3 kids. They're all, a junior in high school, an 8th grader, and a 3rd grader. So there's always some sort of activities or coordination in the morning before they get out the door and off to school. And then typically in the office about, between 8:30 every day. I usually won't take a meeting before 9 o'clock, candidly. And part of that is just to be able to come in, clean up on emails, structure, some quiet time for myself to sort of set the tone for the day. I also always read the paper. And I'm still probably one of the unique people, even though we're a digital bank, I still get hard copies of the paper at home. But every day I read the Charlotte Observer to understand kind of what's going on locally within my community. And I also read the Wall Street Journal on a daily basis. And again, to try to get that broader perspective. And with that, usually I'm sending pictures or texts of articles to my leaders almost every morning, say, hey, make sure you see this article. This is pretty interesting. And then again, into the office by about 8:30. Meetings start at 9. I'm very blessed with a wonderful assistant, Amanda Bregman, who really helps. She is very defensive of my calendar, and that's by design, because I will tell you, there is, without exception, there is a portion of every day that does not go as planned. It could be there's a fire here, there's a fire there, there's somebody that urgently needs you, you've got a board member calling, or hey, you saw an issue pop up that you want to address. And so I always try to create free capacity in my calendar to address the things that are the great unknowns that occur throughout the day. But typically, I'm in meetings for 2.5 or 3 hours in the morning, quick break for lunch. Usually that's at my desk. Sometimes I'll get out for a little bit, but I guess lately in these volatile markets that we've been facing, I've been more desk-bound lately. And then in the afternoon, it's usually back to meetings. Try to wrap up meetings by about 5 o'clock again, so I can go back to sort of cleaning up work and sort of setting my own tone for the next day. But that's a typical day when I'm here in Charlotte in the office, or I'm in Detroit in the office. And then, there's a lot of customer travel, visits to regulators, visits with board members, things like that also occur frequently throughout the year.
You mentioned something interesting, which is mental focus. And I'm like you, I'm probably up around 6 every morning. And for me, I also have to have that workout in, and I have like a very structured routine in the morning: walk the dogs, take the kids to school, exercise. And I feel like sometimes we neglect the importance of mental focus. So can you talk a little bit more about that and why that's so important for leaders out there? I know you're also wearing a fitness tracker. So how in tune are you with what's going on with your body, what's going on with your mind? Is this something that you're constantly paying attention to as a leader of an 11,000 person company?
Yeah, great question. And it is something that I focus on. I tend to be more of a data geek and a data junkie. And so, yes, with respect to my fitness tracker, it has made me, which I began wearing kind of right at the onset of COVID. And when I learned that there were a number of professional athletes, notably on the PGA Tour, that had discovered that, in fact, they were experiencing COVID symptoms through their fitness device. And I thought that's pretty smart to do that. And I started wearing one. But what I found, it's brought me a lot of discipline in understanding what my recoveries look like. And do I need to get to bed earlier? While I talked about kind of what happened throughout the day, I usually try to get to bed now at 9:30. My Whoop or my fitness device is telling me typically to get to bed.
You can say
about
Whoop.
that.
We're fans of Whoop.
All right. Well, yeah, that's the actual device that I've got on my wrist and that I've been wearing. And Whoop's been great for me to, again, continue that discipline and allow me to make sure I'm carving out times for focus. And, one of the things we were talking about kind of before we went live was even the power of the Apple Watch. And one of the things that I like in the app is, the mindfulness. It'll pop up and it will actually try to get you to focus and take a minute or two throughout your day to kind of calm your breathing. And I think that is so important to have like a clear mind and a clear head in running an organization. And another factor that I follow is there's a book, it was written by Greg McKeown, and it's called Essentialism.
Yeah, Greg
It
was a
was
guest on the podcast as well. I think it was last year.
Fantastic. Well, and I had Greg come and talk to our top about 130 leaders in the company about a year and a half ago, because I really believe in the discipline of that. And again, the disciplined pursuit of less. And when you do that, it creates tremendous focus and clarity to really focus on the things that matter. And so, I try every day to really find clear head time, clear thought time, look at my calendar throughout, the coming months with that essentialism lens. Do I really need to be there? Do I really need to do that? And again, it allows me to prioritize really the things that ultimately matter the most. And I start with the culture and health of our company at the top of the list there.
Do you actually make decisions based on either mental focus or based on data that you might be getting from a fitness tracker? For example, if it says you're burned out, will you try to not have stressful meetings that day? If you say that you're rested and recovered, is that when you're going to try? Will you actually make business decisions based on the data that you have about your mind and your body?
I don't think I've taken that leap yet or that step yet, but certainly I recognize, I'll know when I have a clearer head and a clearer mind and clearer focus. And often that is associated when my Whoop or Apple Watch are telling me that, your recovery's better, your fitness level is better, your sleep was better the night before. I think ultimately you can be sharper in how you evaluate things when, again, you're well rested, when you have critical and a clear head and ability to think.
It's interesting. I wonder if in the coming years we're going to see more of optimized leadership, where a lot of leaders at companies, whether you're the CEO or leading a team or a function, are going to be more in tune with what's going on mentally, emotionally, and make business decisions and change their leadership style based on data they have about themselves. Because, the stuff that you can collect now through these trackers, through all the stuff that's out there, you can find out if you're very stressed or not. And, maybe if you're very stressed, you might not want to have an all hands team meeting or do an annual performance review. So I think it'll be an interesting trend to pay attention to over the coming years.
I completely agree with you, Jacob. And there's the CEO of a company, it's a really fascinating company called Red Ventures, Rick Elias. He just did an hour-long podcast on the power of sleep as well. And, I think CEOs are becoming more open to talk about, whether it's sleep, whether it's mental focus, mental health, whatever it is, about all that coming back to how you make clear and concise decisions and lead your companies. And so I think you're exactly right, Jacob, that we're going to see more and more steps in that direction over time.
Workplace is a business communication tool from Meta. Think Facebook, but for your company. It's part of Meta's vision for the future of work. A future in which we'll all feel more present, connected, and productive. Start your journey into the future of work at workplace.com/future. Again, that's workplace.com/future. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the stuff that we've been hearing a lot in the news and media. And we've been hearing a lot about quiet quitting. We've been hearing a lot about this debate coming back to the office. We've been hearing about the Great Resignation. As the CEO of a large company, are these things that you are trying to deal with inside your company, or do you hear those things and you're kind of like, what's going, who's coming up with this stuff? I'm not seeing this. It's not true. Where do you stand when you hear all these things being thrown out there?
Yeah, well, I'd say it's all of the above. And let me start from Ally's perspective. One of the things that I think makes us really special and unique is we have an incredible culture. And I always talk about, it's not my culture, it's not the CEO's culture. Culture is something that I may set a tone, but culture is nurtured and created and cultivated every single day. So, it's up to the 11,000 or 11,500 teammates of mine to really care for that every day. And I think when you have a strong, purpose-driven culture that people rally behind and believe in, one, you have different degrees of engagement and retention. And so for us, our retention levels have been extraordinarily strong for a long history, for the past 5-6 years, I'd say, but also really since all of these more recent trends have come to fruition, with people talking about leaving the workforce. We haven't had any dramatic change in our numbers. We also, our company scores about 9 points higher on the benchmark survey used by many financial institutions on employee engagement there. So we have a really engaged workforce, and we're proud of all that. Now, having said that, we are very mindful of kind of the unique challenges that are going on. First, you go back to the end of 2019 or the start of 2020, and everyone more or less was working a 5-day work week in the office. We had a number of employees that were kind of permanently designated remote if they were in alternative locations. And we've always been a company that prides itself in great flexibility. We recognize people have to live a personal life and a professional life simultaneously. And as you mentioned, walking the dog, taking the kids to school. And as I mentioned, you have to balance all that. So we've always had a culture that provided flexibility for our teammates. But fast forward to today, now, we are gradually trying to ramp up the importance of getting people back into the office at least 3 days a week. And I have never once since the start of the pandemic questioned the productivity of the company. Frankly, productivity is probably even more improved. But the things that I've worried about are, how do we maintain the culture of the company? How do we ensure a sound control environment, which is very important as a financial institution? And also, how do we avoid mental health burnout for some of the people that, it is now perhaps even blurrier between when personal hours begin and when work hours stop. I mean, all of that, when you're doing everything from home, is even commingled. So we're cognizant of all this today, and we are gradually trying to get people back into the office. I have not put out a hard mandate, and we've started to see some of the other CEOs in financial services do that, but I don't think that's the right approach for Ally. I think our approach is one that we got to remind people about the great buildings that we have in place, about the importance that we are a culture of collaboration and working together. And I think that in and of itself will create a little FOMO, fear of missing out on those experiences. And, in Charlotte in particular, last year, we opened up a new 26-story building, world-class technology, plenty of fun things for our teammates to do. And so, every week, though, for I would say the past, call it 3 or 4 months, we are seeing a gradual uptick in people's returning. And so I think that gradual approach, again, that FOMO factor, is going to get people more excited and re-engaged about coming back into the office. But like all things, Jacob, it's a balance.
Yeah. At what point is enough enough? So I talk to a lot of CEOs on this show, and there's kind of this debate that's going on. At one point, and you mentioned some financial CEOs, and there are a lot of CEOs out there. Elon Musk from Tesla basically said, come into the office or find a new job. And we've seen a lot of leaders like that. But it seems like before the pandemic, what happened is a lot of organizations had more power in terms of telling employees when to work, where to work, how to work. Then COVID happened, everything became virtual. And now it seems like the pendulum has shifted very much in the hands of employees. And employees are now saying, we want more money, we want equity in companies, we don't even want to come into the office anymore. And some of the CEOs that I interview are kind of like, it's just not sustainable anymore. The balance has just gone so out of whack. And candidly, some of these CEOs are just saying, it's insane. These people want a full-time job and they don't even want to come into the office anymore. What's going on? How is that? Yeah. How can you work full-time at a company and never show your face? This would be unheard of. 10, 15 years ago, I can only imagine the days when you were at Abercrombie and all these other companies and you're like, yeah, I'll take the job, but you're never going to see me. At what point is enough basically? And is this sustainable with so much, with the pendulum have shifted so much the other direction?
Yeah. To me, I think in the office for the vast majority of our teammates, 3 to 4 days a week is likely going to be the new norm. I would hope we, through time, navigate more towards 4 days a week, but I think you just got to be realistic about the hyper competitive environment. We are all in for talent. And you're
Yeah.
exactly right, Jacob. I mean, we've seen, compensation levels rise across the board. One of the things I'm really proud of that you mentioned that Ally's been doing, this will be our 4th year, is we actually give stock to all 11,000 plus employees. It was something that I worked with my board, again, we've been doing it pre-pandemic because, part of the power of creating an owner's mindset. Let all of
Yeah.
you're not just employed here, you actually own part of this company. And it creates a different philosophy, a different level of an engagement. And we tie that in, that owner's mindset into, hey, we need people engaged and being back in the office. And I, candidly joke with a lot of our younger generation about, hey, you're my retirement plan, right? Ultimately, you are the next chapter of leaders in this company. And we need to make sure that you're understanding about how to resolve conflicts, how to work together, how to engage with a leader, how to engage with peers, how to engage with others. And, while Zoom and other technologies can allow that to some degree, nothing can really replace that face-to-face interaction. And then, of course, there's also the secondary order effects. I mean, I look at in our brand new building in Charlotte, there's a number of retail spaces that have yet to be filled. And so ultimately, us getting back to the office also fuels the other economies around us. And I think that's one of the things that's critically important. So we're trying to get our teammates to think broader than just themselves and really think about developing others, supporting other businesses, supporting our communities. But like you said, it's a very complicated topic. I'm not there yet to say enough's enough and put out a hard edict like Elon Musk or some of the other CEOs have. But I'm clearly ratcheting up the rhetoric around the importance of being together and being engaged.
It's tough because I know even Amazon, they raised their minimum wage, I think, to $18 an hour. And now there's like push, raise it to $25 an hour. And the CEO basically was like, you got to be reasonable like that. It's not sustainable. You're going to bankrupt the entire company. You're asking for stuff that's just not realistic for a business like ours to be able to offer. And I'm hearing that more and more from a lot of executives that they're just being stretched thin. I have a couple executives or leaders at organizations who are interviewing employees, and they're telling me that the asks from these employees are higher salary expectations than their boss's boss. And it's like, it just feels like there's so much imbalance going on. But hopefully, it'll stabilize a little bit. But do you feel that a little bit too, that things are just like a little out of whack in some areas?
Absolutely. And the competitive environment clearly is, the employee of today has quote unquote much more leverage than
Yeah.
perhaps they did, 10, 15, 20 years ago. For us, I try to root it all back to the culture. I mean, often I'm very transparent, hey, perhaps you could go to another financial institution in Charlotte or in a different city, but are you going to have the same degree of access, of opportunity, the same type of culture? We try to bring back that holistic experience. And I will tell you, by in all spirit, all truth and spirit, any employee that ever writes me, I write every single one of them back. I respond to any person in our company. And, that creates a different level of really trying to ensure that everyone embraces you're empowered. You're empowered to communicate with whoever, to be engaged, to make a difference. And I think that's led to really strong engagement and retention here, which should help through time buffer some of these hyper competitive compensation pressures. I mean, we've certainly had to raise our minimum wage. We're looking at doing that again, and we'll do that, in the economic interest. But ultimately, from competitive forces, sometimes you just have to say enough's enough. But we're trying to really root our teammates back to the purpose and the mindset of our company.
Yeah, no, it's important. And I'm glad you're seeing the kind of similar trends that a lot of other executives are seeing, which is tough. I also wanted to ask you about another interesting, I don't know if you would call it a trend, but an interesting observation that a lot of executives are making, and that is the need for more transparency and authenticity, but also being authentic and transparent in a very polarizing world. In other words, it seems like what's going on is a lot of employees are saying, hey, we want to know what you think. We want to know the issues that you care about and what you stand for. Like, be open, be honest and authentic. But at the same time, if you say something that we don't like, we're going to come after you with pitchforks. And I feel like that makes it very challenging because a lot of executives that I've talked to kind of candidly behind the camera are like, we don't know what to do. On the one hand, we're being asked to speak up, but on the other hand, if people don't like what we say or they don't agree with us, nobody's giving us a break. They're just, full on, go after this person. So how do you balance that? Because, it seems like, especially now, a very polarizing world, a lot of arguments, a lot of debate. You say the wrong thing and people really come after you, but they also want to know what you think and they want you to be transparent.
Yeah, Jacob, fantastic question, and I would say it's a big issue that personally, professionally, I face, and many other CEOs do, and I spend a lot of time thinking about this. And in fact, earlier this year, I put out kind of a foundation of principles of communication and matters that I'm going to communicate on, and other matters that I'm not going to communicate on, and trying to strike the right balance. Because to your point, you look at politically, and unfortunately, every issue that comes up in our country today seems to get aligned to political sides of the aisle, and we're as politically divided as a country as we've ever been. It's kind of in the elections show it. And I find that very unfortunate that this is happening. But to your point, if you speak on one side, you have tremendous risk that it's going to create a firestorm on the other side. But for us, I'd say, we are rooted in our deep, deep beliefs of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and equality for all. And so where I've been very vocal is on matters of systemic racism, social injustices, and really ensuring that all of our teammates at Ally, all 11,000 plus, feel safe and feel empowered and feel okay to be their authentic selves. I think that's critically important. But there are certain issues. Roe v. Wade is one. I understand the broad challenges that are out there, but I'm not necessarily sure that as a financial services CEO that I should directly comment on that. But I look at the actions that we have, our benefits programs, the things that we have out there that support women's rights, that support LGBTQ women rights as well. It's, we're trying through actions to do the right things, but not always having to be leading at the forefront in what we say. It's often those words become so politically charged, and I just don't want to be there. That's not the manner in which I want to lead the company. But this has been a challenging force facing me and other CEOs really over the past 3 to 6 months, and I don't see it going away.
Yeah, it's hard because leaders screw up too, just like everybody else. And if you're Jacob in accounting and you make a mistake, people might give you a little bit of flack for it. But, if you're the CEO of Ally Financial and you make that exact same mistake, it's like, oh my goodness, it's tough. And I think in general, we're kind of living in a society now where we just don't give people a break anymore.
Yeah,
like we assume that any mistake somebody makes is meant with like ill intent. I mean, I don't even know how we got to this point, but I would imagine it's very, very hard to be a leader in today's world, even if you're leading a team or a function, let alone leading a company. So what do you do? I mean, do you feel that extra added pressure? Do you spend more time just having conversations with your senior leaders, making sure you're aligned on stuff? Or how have you had to adapt knowing that this is kind of the new landscape that you have to lead in?
Yeah, a lot of conversations with the leadership team, and very transparent, direct conversations, and again, reinforcing those principles of communication and why we have those principles. But also, actions more than words, critically important. At Ally, we have multiple ERGs. Those are our employee resource groups, and there's a women's ERG, there's a veterans ERG, there's a Aliados representing our Hispanic community ERG, and there's others. There's certainly in support of our Black and Brown communities, our Asian communities. And also, more than just saying ERG engagement, show up, go there, listen to what they're facing, learning. And your presence makes an impact. Let people understand you're trying to relate, you're trying to understand. And so really getting much more directly engaged. And it's one of the things, back to the culture of the company, really proud of. We have about 40+% voluntary participation in our ERGs. So our teammates, support learning the differences in one another, and I think that's led, again, to a really powerful culture. But I also talk about trying to get people to sort of do two things. One of my messages or words throughout COVID was find the good, right? COVID was horrific. We lost millions of lives across the world. It was a terrible tragedy and health crisis, and I don't mean to undermine it, but also, how do you keep people viewing, what good can come out of it? I think I had dinner more with my 3 kids and wife over the course of that 6 months than I've had probably in the past 10 years. And there were moments of good, trying to keep everyone positive. And with that, assume positive intent. You may not always agree with somebody's exact words, but chances are, if you know the person, assume they're coming from a good place and that they have positive intent. And so we've tried to really reinforce that and instill that in our culture and our company. But again, as you say, these are challenging issues, and I don't think it's going away. And I think in particular for CEOs like myself and for other members of our executive leadership team, our teammates want you to comment on everything. And it's sort of getting people back to what matters to the business, what matters to our culture, to our teammates, our company, we'll talk about, but we're not going to tackle every societal issue right now.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to this episode with JB, the CEO of Ally Financial. Remember that if you subscribe, you will get access to a bonus episode where JB is going to share what he looks for in great leaders, his 3 leadership philosophies that have guided him to success, and how you can start to create a culture that allows for and supports and encourages vulnerability at work. The subscription is only $4.99 a month, or if you want a lower price, you can subscribe for $49.99 a year, which is less than the cost of a cup of coffee a month. If you subscribe, you're going to get a bonus episode like the one with JB every single week, along with early access to new episodes and ad-free listening. I think it's a no-brainer and an amazing value. Hopefully you do as well. So please subscribe and support the show.